All right, it says we are ready to go live, so I guess we are live with Cody Willard, Dan Geraci. What's up, Bryce? Sanatsi's down there. Joe Waldman's in the room. What's going on, gents, for the weekly SKTLs community / volunteer call?
SKTLs Space Crypto. So we always talk space and crypto. I'll start off with this. We'll get to the news about Blue Origin's engine blowing up yesterday and what that means for the United Launch Alliance, which is where that engine was supposed to go. But I was telling Bryce that, where AI is right now, it's just this frenzy, right? Perhaps a bubble, but for sure a frenzy of valuation and wealth being created, at least near term. But if you had spent the last 5 years preparing and learning and studying that industry, you would be ready for this right now. And, I trade with Cody. We've had NVIDIA for 7 years, partly in large part because of its AI business line and the potential for it to revolutionize that. But there's others that are out there, including Microsoft, that we probably should have been in. The fact of the matter is, I enjoy doing these calls because I like the people we work with on these that we volunteer with. You guys are awesome, and Michelle and everyone else who's been, Danielle and anybody who's been here and has helped, as Prince Will, for the last year and a half, we've been doing this. But the fact is, I fully expect still that in 5 years, maybe 7 years, space will be doing its own bubble frenzy wealth creation thing. And Apple's going to have a constellation up there, and Microsoft is going to have a constellation up there, and Amazon already has announced they will have a constellation up there called Kuiper. And Fortune 500 companies are going to need to have space strategies and all of the different services, applications, factories, tourism, all of the stuff that'll be going on in space. You'll have to have studied this. You have to be doing this. These calls are valuable. Showing up here once a week, talking to Dan Geraci, talking to you guys, learning about space, following the industry, having CEOs of startups, of space startups come on here. This stuff is going to be very valuable in 5 to 7 years, and we will be ready for the bubble frenzy space revolution as it develops. I mean, it's already developing clearly, but the frenzy comes, and we're going to be, if you've been paying attention, you're going to know every company that's publicly traded, every company that's going to be becoming publicly traded, and which ones you should be invested in. And that's a large reason why I enjoy out with cool dudes and faces.
Yeah, I often liken it to looking at old crypto videos, like just going back down in the rabbit hole and seeing the beginnings of that. So pretty much it was Bitcoin in the beginning, but seeing the original people who were actually involved in mining and thinking about, the possibilities of just Bitcoin, not cryptocurrency in general, but what it ended up becoming. It could very well, like you've been saying, this could be that similar time in the age to where we look back 5-7 years and it's just like, man.
I'm glad we were there. I'm glad we bought Rocket Lab. I'm glad we were figuring out how to get invested in SpaceX. I'm glad we did the stuff we're doing. Dan's going to be glad he got in a great space startup that can help revolutionize the world. Like, these things are going to be tangible in a very large multi-trillion-dollar way in 5, 7, 10 years. And you don't have, we bought NVIDIA at $7 and have ridden it up this far. And we've got other names at AI that I should have been in. And I'm pissed off at myself for not having been ready for this revolution better than I was. But I do think we're preparing for what will be 5 years from now, 7 years from now, a similar multi-trillion-dollar boom being developed, and we're going to know everything we need to know. Yesterday, Bryce and I were on the phone with another, startup, a guy who helped found SpaceX, friend of Elon Musk's from the founding days, and I don't know that we'll invest in the company, but regardless, we learn, we network, we're figuring it out. We know the different strategies for launching. We know the different strategies for satellites. We know the different satellite strategies from like companies like Redwire, which are going to supply into this industry. And that's what if you want to know it all, you have to do it for years. You have to get entrenched in this stuff and not just show up on the latest frenzy. Dan Geraci.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I think looking forward for space, I think it's going to be, the only thing I would say is it's plural. There will be many bubbles. There will be many waves. And that's the way I look at it. It's going to be waves of advancement in this economy because there are so many factors, commercially, government, military, especially, low Earth orbit, outer orbit, cislunar, lunar, Mars. This is a cascading of waves of development that are going to continue on well past all of our existences, if you will. And I think that this is more like the beginning of, being around at 1900 or the late 1800s as the Industrial Revolution started, where entire economies and demand for all kinds of capabilities and technology that never existed before because they never had to exist come into play. And we've talked many times here about, every company needs a space strategy. And I saw a comment today where every company will be a space company as we go forward. And I think that's how people have to try to imagine this. You have to stretch your mind a little bit to imagine kind of starting everything we know here over again someplace else in a different environment with different factors at play, where we take a lot of what we know and have learned and have to morph it into something that'll work in a completely different environment, in other planets, other bodies. And this isn't science fiction. This isn't, the 1940s thinking about, landing on wild planet someday. This is called 2025, 28, 30, 33, 35, 40. We are likely going to be, walking around on Mars in another 15 to 20 years tops. And so the investment side of that is going to be a continuous, 2 steps, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. There's going to be a lot of growth, a lot of failures, a lot of money made, and a lot of money lost. And I think being educated, as you said, is going to be really
You'll have
important.
an edge. I mean, you're not going to have an edge in AI showing up last month, 6 months ago, and picking out some AI stocks.
Well, if you
spent 5 years deep in the trenches and talking to AI startups and AI companies, you had an edge coming into this move.
Well, and AI is going to simply, as we go forward, simply in quotes, be a player in the space economy. It's going to be a facilitator for a lot of capabilities, as opposed to simply an industry in and of itself. And, this is going to be like, if you bought tech in 96, 98, 99, versus buying it for the first time now, you learned a lot by going through this cycle. And that's where we are with space. We're in the mid to late 90s with tech. And I've said this a million times and I'll keep saying it. And every time everybody thinks they know everything, they get their rear ends handed to them by the markets. And that is going to be no different with space.
Bryce, are you listening?
Yeah.
So I made a comment today in a thread in LinkedIn where, my good friend Jim Cantrell was talking about and responding to this whole notion of, VCs not being the best investors for space. And the comment I made was, listen, you want to be private as long as you can in this industry, because once you become public, you are, a victim of and beholden to a 90-day earnings cycle. You can no longer plan or invest in your business long term. You can't be willing to take big risks because you're going to have a bunch of uneducated analysts on the street who know nothing about space trying to, guess where you're going to go based on a tech model of the past. And so you're better off staying private.
They get myopic. And this is what, if several years ago, Elon Musk got really frustrated and told the operator to hang up on the sell side analysts who were asking him about the gross margin differences on the Model 3, which they had just like 3 months earlier started building.
He's done that on a few
I don't know,
calls.
gross margins will be negative initially or no. And the analyst was like, well, do you think it'll be minus 5% or minus 7%? And Elon was like, get him off the call. I can't do this. And that's what, if you're worried about space margins right now, you're missing the big picture. And it's going to be, like you said, there will be a lot of losses. I mean, there's going to be 90% of the startups that are here right now will not be here in 5 years. But the ones that survive are going to be multi-billion-dollar businesses, or I think SpaceX is the most valuable company on the planet.
As the famed investor Peter Lynch, once said, the most important organ for investing isn't the brain, it's the stomach. And you have to just play by the old rule of the trend is your friend. And you have to be directionally correct with picking companies in the space industry. You're not going to get it right. There's no magic earnings formula that's going to predict a winner versus a loser. Not yet. There's no history, and there isn't enough history, and there isn't enough public history and availability of financials.
We're quite literally blazing trails to the sky, to the moon.
Yeah.
And that will require some and like puns are just, the space industry is great for puns. Like, things are going to blow up as we go to the moon.
Speaking of which,
my God, Dan, Cabana, you got a video of? Is there video footage of the Blue Origin blow up? You're on a beach. Why did I even ask you? Never mind. I've got a video up here.
The news.
I can try to share the screen, but I was going to ask you like an investment question. I guess
sure.
Because you mentioned AI before, and as it could pertain to space investing. So you mentioned Microsoft, like a position like that, and you're like, darn it, you woulda, coulda, shoulda. But that's with anybody investing, right? So how do you, I guess, go about that thinking, because you're a long-term investor with space stocks? Is there a point to where it's just like, what, this thing's running away from me, and I want a little piece of it? Maybe even Bryce can chime in, or how does that go with managing a portfolio? It's like, okay, I really want exposure to this name, but it just keeps moving and moving. Is there like a breaking point, or it's just like, what? There are other points, there are other ways I can play this, maybe like an NVIDIA that has its parts in the AI, where I'm happy with that and I'm settled with that. What's your mindset?
I'd love to hear Bryce riff on it a little too, but I would simply say that that's the discipline of not chasing and not being greedy, not doing fear of missing out. And it's hard and it's painful sometimes. And you have to stick to your guns, though. You have to be disciplined. Bryce and I have written up on the board, our whiteboard over here, 2 things. Number 1 is no fear. And number 2 is trust your analysis. And that's it, man. You got to trust your analysis. And if the valuations get stretched and you can't handle, don't buy. You can, you got to wait. You got to wait for the right pitches and wait until you have conviction on not just the sector, not just the concept, not just the business, but the valuation. If you're going to, I think valuations right now are being ignored again. And that's going to come back to haunt a lot of greedy, FOMO, fear of missing out, momentum traders and investors in 6 months or 2 years. But valuations matter. You think they don't until they do. Bryce?
Yeah, I for me, and for both of us probably, it's a lot easier to bottom pick than it is to chase, like by a long mile. But that said, like, I always talk about Microsoft as the famous example, because I've never owned a Microsoft. And that thing was expensive. It's been expensive stock forever. And then you look at that chart, I mean, it's almost a straight line. And so that's a big example of one that you could have chased, and maybe you still can chase. I'm not chasing Microsoft, but there is something to be said about being able to, like, if you trusted if you dug into Microsoft and you believed in the theory, and like that's part of our problem with that company. We just struggle.
I hate the product. I hate Microsoft Windows computers.
Right. But like, if you did that and you believed in it and trusted your analysis, then there was a lot of money to be made there. We just never did that, but it's not to say we can't. We held our
nose, 7 years ago, I held my nose and got into Amazon. It was trading at the time, 80 times earnings, way too expensive, but they were rolling out Alexa. What I was doing, I called it the voice revolution at the time. And I was like, they've got this Amazon Web Services. It's going to do 20, 30, 40% annualized growth, 95% gross margins. That's going to replace some of this retail, 40%, 30% gross margin retail business, like all of those factors. And so what Bryce is describing, we did pinch nose. I did hold my nose, and I'm going to buy it. The valuation now looks stretched, but if I look out in 5 years, it's probably going to be a good buy. Again, I think Bryce is right. My biggest problem with Microsoft forever, it's never really been I've traded it and owned it a few times over the years. I have never been able to get over the fact that even right now, my golf simulator is on the highest end Dell Alienware computer that you can get for gaming. And Bryce will tell you, about half the time you go in there and turn that sucker on and it can't find its freaking hard drive.
Well, all I can tell you is we're focusing on one thing and we're missing something else. And this is all about what an investor's focus is, what their time horizon is. If you're a portfolio manager who's looking to trade and you're looking to time, then yeah, you can lament Microsoft and every other company that somebody didn't get in at the quote right time. But it's time in the market that makes real money long term, not timing the market. And the same thing with AI. This is the first inning to your question, Cabana. This isn't the ninth inning. This isn't game's almost over already. Oh, I missed it. If you're thinking you missed a window in the beginning to get in and make a quick buck and jump out, sure. But it's the same thing with space. It's the same thing with the way tech was. A lot of people traded their way and made a lot of money and got blown up in the process because, I got in at the top and out at the bottom. What a novel concept. That's 70% of investors. You're following the crowd right off the cliff. It's about if someone's looking to make money long term, then you buy good, fundamentally strong. And I don't mean simply fundamental analysis. I just mean, hey, where's this trend line? Is this going to be bigger in 10 years? Is the space industry going to be bigger? Is the AI industry going to be bigger? Are any of these categories going to be larger than they are now? The answer is yes. Buy it. Don't look at the paper because, don't look at your quotes. And I always just tell investors this, if you could see your house's value in the newspaper every day, you'd have a heart attack a week, but you can't because you're forced to consider it as a long-term investment. And if you want to make money long-term, that's what you do. If you want to play swings, let somebody else who's a professional manage your money in a fund. Don't try it yourself because you're going to get killed.
Dan, you make two excellent points. Bryce, will you grab Reminiscences of a Stock Operator off of your table behind you?
Great book.
The most famous stock trading book in the world. There's my favorite quote from that book. He's a trader, not an investor, and he says he always made his biggest money sitting on his hands.
Yeah.
Like that's when you make the money. You buy and you wait. You hold.
This is a crypto channel, and what is it? I mean, even in something as stable in quotes as a Bitcoin, the biggest gains in that happen 10, 15 days out of the year? Like, it's ridiculous, and you're going to miss that if you're trying to
stock market. That's the stock market.
Or any other market. Yeah.
If you missed, I forget what the stat is now. The the 10 or 12 biggest up days in the last 30 or 40 years, you missed X% of the market lift that was available to be made. You just can't be trying. And crypto's another one. Let's see what it looks like in 5 or 10 years. Unless you're, plan on dying in a week and a half, sit on the stuff and don't trade unless you're a professional.
My only, what I'm questioning right now, though, is we've in the last 20, 25 years have went from a period of secularly declining interest rates and 0% interest rates. And we had one of the most terrific bull markets in American history. And when you look back in the 60s or the 70s or the
55 through 65.
After 1920s and the crash, there was decades that went by when everything was flat, and you could have bought Cisco or Intel in 1999, and you're just now getting back to even. And so, we still, I think, trying to train myself to be conscious that buy and hold. There are times when that doesn't work, and that's when you have to actually. That goes back to this will be a good closing of the loop here on this discussion. That goes back to why we sit here and study space now, because you want to own the trends. That was the other point you made. That was I wanted to focus on, Dan, was the trends, like the long-term trends that are secularly growing that Bryce just mentioned. The idea that even if the economies cycle up and down, maybe the growth of the rate of space investments and economy fluctuate with that, but it will grow every year for 20 or 30 years. AI probably going to, the valuations notwithstanding in AI, the industry itself probably going to grow for 10, 20 years. And you've got to be able to accept that you will have cycles within that, but the growth itself is going to be there. And you want to recognize that trend is the most important part of what you're doing. You want the 5 or 10 year, my hedge fund's called 10,000 days, which is 27 years. And you want to be able to recognize trends that over that time frame, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, get to be multi-trillion-dollar economies. And I still, Redwire, Black Sky, Rocket Lab, every publicly traded space stock has been hit. They're all down.
And how long have they all been around?
And Viasat are actually at some all-time highs.
They're still
almost bankrupt.
But if you wait long enough, and you are patient, and perhaps these things do live on for 5, 7, 10, way more years, this is the time to buy them in the trough, which trading with Cody subscribers.
Hindsight's great. Hindsight's great. Everybody can talk about what did or didn't work, but the reality is, and this is to Bryce's point, if you're just picking individual stocks and you're not buying sectors and you're not buying multiple positions, you're going to have a million examples of companies that you bought and held that didn't work out. And you're going to have, people always talk about the stock they bought that went up. They never talk about the 10 they bought that went down. And everybody's got winners. The losers are in the attic, like the crazy uncle. So,
we sell the losers and forget about them.
Most people sell the winners, and that's the problem with most investors. And they hang on to the garbage. And Jeff Weiss's book, by the way, Relationship Investing, someone that I introduced Cody to, there's some great rules in there. And the one thing I encourage every investor, and I've done this for 40 years to do, is stop loss orders on every position you own. You put in a stop loss, and you set a price limit to when you're going to get out. And if the stock keeps running up, you keep raising the stop loss.
We're having our first disagreement of the day. I do not like stop loss orders.
I was going to disagree, but
I'm going to get a whoosh down, and it's going to hit my stop loss, and I get taken out of my favorite stock. And then, and Dan, the flip side of it, look, all of this stuff, there's rights and wrongs. There is no perfect approach to any of this. But in 2008, if I had stop loss orders on my Apple, I would have gotten sold out at some point, and I would have had to try to buy back in at some point. I have about 7 forever positions, including NVIDIA. in my personal account that I have owned for many years, and I plan to. They're forever. I just don't sell them. I'm going to ride them. That's it, up or down.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Cody?
Joe Anderson, yes.
Hey, sorry, my video isn't working as badly as I want you guys to see me. Just kidding. But could stop losses be used simply for if you're wanting to trade? If you want to be a trader, then stop losses maybe. But if you're investing for your forever stock, then you don't worry about the stop losses. I mean, that might be the way to do that.
I can agree more with that, just because, I mean, just based upon our age of algorithms, people are big traders know where the stops are. They will stop hunt. So if you're like, oh, this is a good resistance level on the chart or a good support level on the chart, nowadays that's going to get taken out by $1 or wherever the valuation is, and you had it right.
They'll come get you.
Yeah, you had it right in your mind.
You're not big enough to get their attention,
and it'll go right back up.
That's the problem. Stop loss works. You don't sit there and wait and watch the place burn down. If a stock's moving up, you are constantly adjusting up and rolling up the stop. You're not sitting there waiting for something to happen. You would have gotten out of NVIDIA much higher if you were rolling stop losses up as the stock kept moving up.
Or you just don't sell it. I still own it. I'm not getting out of it. It's forever.
Dan said a key thing there is rolling up. So I was just talking like, oh, you're in a position and this is the floor and that's it. But yes,
that's not how you do it.
Up, there you go. Yeah,
it's not how you do it. That's not how you do it.
All right, let's try to show this video. I don't even know. Is there video of it? I just pulled up. I Googled it. Blue Origin.
Share your screen. I'll try to find it.
This happened on July 30th, by the way. It didn't happen yesterday.
They just reported it yesterday.
Yeah, they just reported it. Yeah.
The news leaked out from unknown sources that they had an explosion on the test stand of the BE4 engine.
ULA might be a private company, but it is a joint venture between two publicly traded companies, Lockheed Martin and Boeing. And I actually sort of surprises me that seems like maybe it's not material to Boeing and Lockheed overall, so they don't have to mention it. But I think there are investors in Boeing and Lockheed who are partly in them because they believe in the ULA and its place in the space revolution.
Lockheed is a $100 billion company. A rocket blowing up in a test stand, you're not going to even feel it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's at the end of the day.
And by the way, tests, unfortunately, bombs and weapons.
This is why they test, right? Is to find out what's not working. And they found out it's not working.
Fuck around, find out.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so yes, for both ULA, for the Vulcan Centaur, and for Blue Origin's New Shepard, this is the engine. So there's two programs that are, hampered by this, neither of which the spacecraft has flown yet. So yeah, it sets them back a bit. We'll just go back and do it again. This is no different than Elon having something blow up. It's like, okay, what went wrong? Go fix it. And they're saying they know already what happened, but we're too focused as a marketplace and a society to see a test failure as being catastrophic in the end of the world. It's necessary.
That being said, Dan, it feels to me there is no video. There is footage. There's a photo or two. I'm not going to bother with it. Forget it. Bryce and I talk a lot about how SpaceX is probably 5 to 7 years ahead of ULA on launch. I don't know if ULA can ever catch them on pricing. But seeing this yet again, and ULA not even being able to get the rocket to the ship to test the ship, right. It feels like the lead is growing. The SpaceX is moving on to Starship, and they'll probably have that up and running before ULA gets this Vulcan thing up.
Yeah, I think what you're really talking about is the difference in business models, operating structures, risk profiles, the approach to risk. I think Boeing and Lockheed are victims of their history, great history, but of a bloated bureaucratic servitude to the federal government, and especially NASA, that demands minimum triple redundancy on everything and hyper testing to the point of almost the inability to move an inch in terms of progress. And I think with Elon, it's close your eyes, light the torch, see what happens, go back, do it again, keep doing it until you get it right. And there's a speed differential between the two.
But that's where I feel like it is
That's
a bigger
the issue.
deal that Blue Origin / ULA had this yet again blow up, where when SpaceX does it, they're like, yeah, this is part of our process. We're going to the next one. We got it ready
And
to go. No.
We
Where
collect the data.
This one, they were all sort of hoping and betting that this needed to work to get to the next step, And it's like, it felt, if I were
The
there,
common denominator is
Bruno must have felt, the CEO of ULA must have felt like he got a punch to his gut again. I mean, when are we going to get this thing up?
But the common denominator where these things have not worked out is the primes. It's Boeing and it's Lockheed, especially Boeing. Boeing couldn't get its own craft to fly. They were way behind SpaceX just in their own manned capsule to be able to take astronauts up to the station. They're partnering with Blue Origin. They're having issues. It's not, I don't think it's Blue Origin, other than the fact that they decided to go this route and use other contractors versus SpaceX, who's doing it themselves. The common denominator in these is the old school bureaucratic type of a contractor who can't learn the new way to do it. And I think if you want to start a company, the lesson that comes out of this should be, you better start one fresh, like SpaceX did, than to try to change ULA and turn it into a SpaceX. It's never going to happen.
No.
Those stripes don't change. They're not changing.
Questions
And the
or
longer
comments,
they wait,
last
the
words?
longer they wait, the further behind they get.
Last words, everybody? Anybody? Nazi, are you going to say
I don't know
anything
why
today?
anybody, if you were a,
Yes.
hear me?
Yeah, what'd you say, Bryce, and then Sanatzi?
I just think I'm picturing if I was a 22-year-old rocket engineer graduating from MIT, why would you want to go work for Blue Origin and Boeing and ULA when you could go work for SpaceX and go to Mars?
Not everybody can work for SpaceX, number one. And you know what? Your objective is to get a job and get some education. These aren't bad companies. They're more natural. And now we're measuring everybody by SpaceX, which is really unfair to everybody else. SpaceX is truly special. Yeah. These other companies, they're much more, quote, normal in terms of trial and error and fail. And there's some brilliant people at all these companies. You got to go get your education. When you're 10 years, 15 years in, and you're in your mid 30s, oh my God, as that engineer, you're going to go work for wherever you want. You probably start your own company. So, you know, they're all hiring and they're all paying real money. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Bill Sell.
Hi. Just wanted to mention that Piper and I are late at calculating the monthly reward for various reasons. Going to do it tonight myself, and then Piper said he's going to get to it tomorrow. And we always compare notes. So once we do that, we'll obviously text Daniel.
Piper's got a baby coming this week or next.
Uh-oh.
Cool. Very exciting. It's first.
Cool. I put a link in the chat.
Thanks, Nazi.
And I encourage everybody to read this article from Space News. It's a very thorough, lengthy article on the posture now of national defense with regard to space. And what it does is it'll explain to people.
Is that the Slack chat?
Yeah, in the Slack chat. Sorry. It'll explain to people why the Space Force exists, because there's a lot of people who think it's still silly and who think it's unnecessary. But at the end of the day, the bottom line, and this article stresses it, and I was in Albuquerque yesterday meeting with Space Force, and everything in this article was part of the conversation yesterday. Space Force exists to protect all of our other military personnel on the ground, on the surface of the earth, from attacks from space, from our adversaries. And that's a really good way to look at Space Force. It's not to go fight the aliens, out at the asteroid belt. It's to protect earthbound military assets and people citizens from adversarial attack. And when you read this article, you'll see just what we're faced with already up there that we're now implementing defenses against down here to keep from getting hit from
I don't mean to make anybody paranoid out there, but the truth of the matter is I was born in Roswell, New Mexico on almost exactly the 25th anniversary of when my great grandparents crashed. I mean, when that weather balloon fell.
And you're still in New Mexico.
That's right.
Yeah, man. It's where the aliens,
Well,
where space is happening.
At least you got the grayness out of your skin now, so you're a lot better.
I've seen Cody golf. He kind of golfs like an alien, really
Oh! So
uncoordinated, gravity struggle,
Spindly arms.
Yeah.
That's tough, man. It's hurtful, Bryce. Hurtful. Totally disrespectful. Peace, love, and happiness, everybody. We'll see you guys next Wednesday. Talk more space, more crypto, and learn more.
See ya.
All right, bye.
Bye.